What's up, guys? Welcome back with another deck profile. Welcome back to my channel. So today what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to jump over my Elementsaber budget list. Now, no, this is not the best way to play the deck. I don't believe so anyways. I think the best way to play the deck is to play Invoked. But with Invocation right now being about like $40 a copy, I think that's a little bit insane to put into budget. So we're just going to go ahead and go over my budget list. And this deck is probably like about 20 bucks. So it's really cheap, which is really helpful to all you budget players out there, which I know there are a lot of, and I've gotten a couple messages from budget players asking me for some help. So here's a budget list for you guys that I hope you enjoy, and it's a little fun. You can probably take it to your locals and maybe win a match with it. Don't go expecting too much, but you know, it's a lot of fun to play, and I really enjoy the deck. So starting off, we play 3 La Puella Mana. So this card is really good, and it's the main boss monster of the deck, although there are other monsters that you would like, you know, there are other boss monsters. This is the main one. So essentially, all of these cards revolve around the field spell, which is what we'll get to later. But this card is so good for the deck. So what it does is once per turn, this is like how you special summon it. You send 2 monsters from your hand to the graveyard to special summon it, and then it gains effects based on each attribute that you sent from your hand to the graveyard of Elementsaber monsters. So like, let's say you send Makani, which is right here, and Malehu, which is right here, and this one's Wind, and this one's Dark. So let's see if we go down to La Puella Mana's effect. So you'll see, now that you sent a Wind and a Dark, all Elementsaber's monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle, and your opponent cannot target it with card effects. So basically, like let's say you send like a Wind and a Fire, for example, all Elementsabers you control can't be destroyed by battle or be destroyed by card effects, which is really cool. But you know, it's hefty sending 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard, which is why we'll get to the field spell later, which makes that pretty minuscule. Next, 3 Makani. So this card, what it does is, like, the rest of these Elementsabers all have effects by sending 1 Elementsaber from their hand to the graveyard, and I'll just tell you what the effects are. So Makani, what it does is you send one to add an Elementsaber or Elemental Lord monster from your deck to your hand, which is really cool. It searches out your entire deck basically, so it's a really nice card to have. Next, 3 Malehu. So this card is gonna be like one of your 2 disruptors during your opponent's turn in Elementsaber monsters. So essentially what it does is it has a quick effect, which means you can use it on your opponent's turn, right? You send an Elementsaber from your hand to the graveyard to Book of Moon to set a monster face down. So like, let's say your opponent uses a monster effect, you can just go ahead and chain Makani Malehu to that and set it face down, and obviously the effect won't resolve because face down monsters don't have effects. So 3 La Puella. So this is essentially like what you really want to end on, with your board is like La Puella Mana with whichever 2 effects you want, Malehu with the field spell, and Elemental Training set, and then maybe a couple of hand traps in your hand. That would be like the ideal ending of this deck, and I'll show you why. So 3 La Puella Mana, like I said, 3 Makani, 3 Malehu. Now we play 3 regular La Puella. So this card, when a spell or trap is activated, you send an Elementsaber from your hand to the graveyard, you negate the activation and destroy that, which is really good, and obviously you can use it on your opponent's turn. 3 Malo. So this one's basically for the attribute. So what it does, it's just for the fire attribute pretty much, and we're just maxing out on it, but basically what it does is you send one from hand to graveyard to send an Elementsaber or an Elemental Lord from deck to the graveyard, so it gets you more attributes in the graveyard, which is really cool for the deck. 3 Elementsaber Aina. So what this one does is that, like, you send one from hand to graveyard, and then you target an Elementsaber or Elemental Lord in your graveyard that you summon properly first, so you can't just like target one that you didn't properly summon first. So like, let's say you discard 2 to summon this, you can't special summon any of those back, but like, let's say you special summon this and then your opponent somehow gets rid of it, you can just use this one to bring it right back from the graveyard, which is pretty cool. So yeah, triple of this is basically Monster Reborn. And then we play 2 Nalu. This card's probably the worst one, which is why you only play 2. So what it does is you just send one from hand to graveyard to target one from your graveyard and add it to your hand. The reason this one's the worst one, which like usually people wouldn't say it's the worst one, but the reason this one is the worst one is because you want them in your graveyard. For the main reason that I'm going to talk about right now, every single one of these, except Lapuela Mana, when it's in the graveyard, once per turn, you can change the attribute, and you can declare one attribute, and it becomes that attribute in the graveyard. So like, let's say you want like a light and dark in your graveyard for BLS, but you have like the water and the earth. You can just change one to light, the other to dark, and you can summon BLS, which is really, really cool, and I really like the way this deck works. It's just a lot of fun. So hand traps, I chose like a couple budget hand traps because I believe like you should always play them. It just helps stop your opponent if your strategy doesn't always work out, if your opponent finds a way to stop it. So triple Effect Veiler and 2 DD Crow. These are just like the most budget hand traps that you can find, each being about like 50 cents a copy. Effect Veiler, during your opponent's turn, just negate an effect, and then this one obviously banishes a card from the graveyard. Like, say they use Monster Reborn, you just chain DD Crow and banish the card that they're trying to summon, which is really cool. By the way, any competitive player watching this that already knows, like, obviously all of this stuff that I'm talking about like how quick effects work, this is a budget list, and I know that there are like some competitive players that like do need to play on a budget. But there's just a lot of people who play budget that may not know these interactions, so this is why I'm going over them on like a very small level. Anyways, so now we play our like main boss monsters, Phosphorage, which on summon is Rageki. So basically, you summon Phosphorage by having exactly 5 lights in your graveyard, which is really easy, seeing as all of these change their attributes in the graveyard. So when you have exactly 5 lights in your graveyard, you can just summon it, and then you destroy all monsters your opponent controls. And then this one is the same, but you need to have 5 winds in your graveyard, and it destroys all spells and traps your opponent controls. So whichever one you get is going to be the one that, like, if you want to destroy their monsters, you get Phosphorage. If you want to destroy their spells and traps, you get Windrose. And you search these out with Makani, obviously. I'm now noticing that I forgot to put a card in the deck, but you can work it just fine without. Anyways, this is why you play these two. The unfortunate thing about these is that if they leave the field, then you skip your next battle phase, which is something this deck has a lot. You skip your next battle phase, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, that's why you play those two. And then the last monster is BLS because it's attribute based, right? You play any chaos monster really, but I think BLS is just the best chaos monster. And I have some more monsters that you can play. Those are down in the side deck, which I'll go over later. Next, Triple Palace, and this is the card that the deck needs. This is the main card of the deck. So what it does is all monsters you control, not just Elementsabers by the way, all monsters you control gain 200 attack and defense for each monster with a different attribute in your graveyard, like for each different attribute in your graveyard. So like, each of these is a different attribute, but like if you have 2 of them in the same, then you can just change the attribute of one and it'll gain. So in the end, the max they're gonna gain is 1200, which makes like this like a 3600 monster that's protected by 2 things. And like, because you can only summon it that way once per turn, you can't get both, like all 3 of the effects. But like, let's say you survive the turn and then you summon out the second one, then you're protected from all 3, which means that like you have a 3600 monster that can't be destroyed by battle, card effects, and can't be targeted by card effects. That's super hard for your opponent to get rid of, especially if you're playing in a budget environment. So we played 3 Palace, so that's the first effect. The second effect is once per turn, you can add an Elementsaber monster from your deck to your hand. But unfortunately, like I said, the skipping battle phase is a trend. You have to skip the battle phase of your next turn, which is unfortunate. But like, if you set up your board the way you want it to, it shouldn't matter too much. Next, we play 1 Gateway to Chaos. This is for set rotation. We play Terraforming, so obviously searching out Palace. Oh, I forgot to mention the third effect of Palace. What am I talking about? Third effect of Palace, and this is what makes like Lapuela Mana super broken in this deck, obviously. If you were to send an Elementsaber from your hand to the graveyard, you can send it from your deck once per turn. So like, that's why you always need access to this, because these all lose advantage by sending from hand to graveyard, but now you can send from deck, which means they all plus instead, which is really cool. So it's like a really cool mechanic. And obviously it gets you whichever attributes you want in graveyard, which is really nice. So next we play Gateway to Chaos, like I said, for set rotation. We play terraforming. We play set rotation. Gateway to Chaos is just so good with set rotation. Activate this, on your field. Set this one, and now they're completely locked out of field spells, because if they activate this, it's a mandatory effect to search, so they can't activate it unless they have the target in their deck. And then the next thing is also, while either of those is set on the field, neither player can activate or set other field spells. So like, let's say you activate Palace, because you're allowed to do that, and they have this set, and they can't activate this, so it'll be set on the field, so they're completely locked out of field spells. They can't activate them, which is really cool. So obviously next we play Monster Reborn, because it's Monster Reborn. We play Upstart Goblin, because it's Upstart, and I will take this out for something else, which I'll just talk about after that, but like, Upstart is Upstart, so you can play Upstart too, but don't play Upstart. Triple Elemental Training. So this card is like what gives you 2 disruptions. So essentially what you want to do is, like, if you have Malehu and then this, or like any of these, but like Malehu is probably like the best one. What you'll do is, once you use Malehu's effect to disrupt, you'll activate this to go ahead and summon La Puebla from your deck by tributing this one. And I'll go over the effect. So essentially what it does is, your opponent cannot target Palace of the Elemental Lord you control, the field spell, and also can't be destroyed by card effects. So like, if your opponent has like Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twister, or even Cosmic, because Cosmic Cyclone targets, they can't use it on your field spell. They have to destroy this one first, which is really cool. So then it's once per turn, which, because it's a trap, you can use on your opponent's turn, obviously. You contribute 1 monster, special summon 1 Elementsaber monster from your deck with a different original attribute than that monster's. And then you can send it from the field and your entire hand to the graveyard, and add Elemental Lords up to the number of cards you send from your hand to the graveyard, from your graveyard to your hand. That effect doesn't really matter. And Metaverse to get more access to Palace. So you'll see we have like every single possible card to get access to Palace that doesn't require a normal summon. Otherwise we would use like Planet Pathfinder 2. But that requires a normal summon, and just La Puebla mana probably is not enough to just end the game. So what we're playing against instead of Upstart is, there it is, Reinforcement of the Army. Because all of these are warriors, so play Rhoda. So now, over the next these three boss monsters that we play here, there's 5 options. These are the other 2 monsters. There's Dark Armed Dragon, which obviously you need to have exactly 3 darks in your graveyard to summon it. So you just change them to 3 darks. You summon it, and then you use effect to banish and pop, which is really cool. And if you were to play it, I'd play it over Blackluster Soldier, and I've been testing it, and either one works. This one just pushes for more damage. And then Mulin Glacia. The reason I don't play Mulin Glacia is because to use Mulin Glacia properly, it's really only good like if you can do it first turn, which this deck can usually only summon the second turn, which is why I don't think Mulin Glacia is actually that good in this deck. But really, that's all up to you. So that's it for this deck. Now, you could play an extra deck, and that's all up to you. That we'll go over in the not budget version, because the extra deck is, expensive. So this is why I'm just keeping it budget, and I think this main deck will, maybe do you something. So like, let me just show you in a solo battle what this deck will do going first. All right, and then so you have a Chaos Max deck, solo mode. So I'll just show you like what this deck will do like going first. It's nothing like too crazy. So we drew this and we drew this, which is really nice. So we'll go ahead and use Terraforming, and Terraforming will add us this to our hand. Then we'll activate Palace, and Palace will go ahead and use its effect to search out La Puebla mana to our hand. And then we'll special summon La Puebla mana, and then we'll use Palace to send from deck to graveyard instead of from hand to graveyard. So what we can do here is we can send an Earth and the Fire, so they can't be destroyed by battle or be destroyed by card effects. If you don't want them to be targeted by card effects, you can use that effect too. But we're going to send a Fire and then Earth to the graveyard. So we'll send these 2 to the graveyard. And now, by the way, all monsters you control now are gaining attack, 400 of them. You normal summon Makani, and then you can go ahead and set these two and pass. So this doesn't really look that good, right? So essentially what you're gonna go ahead and do is during your opponent's turn, you can activate this, tribute off Makani, and if you want to be able to negate spells and traps, you special summon La Puela from your deck, and if you want to stop monsters, you special summon Malehu from your deck, right? And then when you use its effect, you can go ahead and use Palace to send from deck instead, right? So like now you can maybe send, if you summon Malehu, you can send La Puela. And now if you look in your graveyard, you have 4 different attributes. So now all of them gain 800 attack. So this is 32 and this is like 27, which makes it actually kind of hard for your opponent to get rid of. So they have to deal with the field spell, which means they have to pop this one first, right? And they're dealing with just like impending threats. And then like you also have the DD Crow in your hand to disrupt them again. So like I said, this budget deck, it's not like insane, but it's definitely not bad, and it can do like pretty well for a budget deck, I think. So if you're really looking for a budget deck, I would recommend this deck to you. Just try it out. You know, get on Dueling Book and use it if you want to. If you don't, then don't. You know, but it's really cheap to pick up in real life. Like all the Elementsaber cards, they came out in Flames of Destruction. Like everyone forgot about them. So I would recommend playing this deck if you're looking for a budget deck. Anyways, that's all. I just had a budget, like a budget player or two message me, so asking for some advice. So I just thought I'd upload a budget deck profile for all of you guys. Anyways, this is all. Let me know if you want to see the not budget version of this deck or any other budget decks, and I'll go over them with you guys. Anyways, that's it for this deck, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.
Invincible.